Hi, I'm Charles with AniCap. Previously, Teacher had reincarnated in a new world as a sword. He hoped that someone would pick him up, and a slave girl named Fran does so in the direst of situations. She then becomes an adventurer after passing a grueling test. As an adventurer, she then finds herself helping out a party fighting against a horde of goblins. The story continues with Fran bravely fighting against the goblins, while Teacher thinks that they might not have a good chance of winning. Seeing her determination, Teacher realizes he has to match her commitment if they are serious about getting stronger together. By the time she is done slaying the goblin horde, Fran had already reached level 12, making huge progress in just a single battle. Garrus is shocked when he hears that they defeated over 100 goblins in a day. They apologize and ask him to start armor repairs right away. Fran then recalls recent adventures with Garrus. She was slaying hordes and hordes of goblins. Seeing this, her fellow adventurers claim that she is now at least a D-class adventurer. They also volunteer to cover her back as she prepares to enter a mysterious goblin cave. Even Donadron is shocked after knowing that Fran has been out in the wild killing hundreds of goblins on sight. Klimt asks her to give a precise number of her killings, and she points it out to be 130, among which 20 of them were high tier ones. Klimt finds it unusual that not a single one of the 130 goblins try to escape back to their cave while losing the battle against Fran. She then mentions that the goblin cave isn't actually a cave, but a dungeon. Klimt then suggests they should form a party right away for exploration. He also offers Fran to join the party and talks about her promotion to F rank if she were to come through. She then asks Garrus a bit about what dungeons were like. He explains that dungeons are trial grounds created by gods of chaos for humans. Old dungeons specifically have a unique ecosystem which become home to rare monsters. More importantly, dungeons often have a lot of treasure to loot, which can be seen as a reward from God for completing the trials. She then takes her leave, after which the teacher begins to review her stats, realizing that she has grown much stronger in all aspects. Fran insists that teacher take a bath with him. He is obviously flustered, but she takes him along anyway. They meet Nell there, and she later joins them for dinner. She jokingly tells her that bringing her weapon to a bath is bad manners. Nell starts to share her food with Fran, talking about how her first dungeon exploration is nearing, giving her some encouraging words in the meantime. Nell begins to wish things would have been easier with the dungeon if only Amanda was there. Fran asks her who Amanda is, and she tells her she is an A-rank adventurer whose life is as busy as it gets. Fran is also curious about the god of chaos, and Nell takes her time to explain to her the lore behind all the gods. The first 10 gods are the strongest ones, out of which sun, moon, ocean, earth, fire, storm, forest, and beast gods created life as they know it now. Among all the gods, chaos is the 10th goddess and is known for keeping balance in the world. The subject of the god of war comes up while talking about chaos, and Nell explains how the god of war turned to the darker side and fell under the shackles of evil. He would then be defeated and split apart by the other gods, and his remains turned out to be monsters like goblins, orcs, and fiends. The next day, Fran stops at Garrus' shop to collect a scabbard for Teacher. He is more than happy to rest himself inside the hold, and Fran looks equally excited to see him in this form. With all preparations complete, the party members gather themselves in front of the dungeon. Fran is very excited to go on her very first exploration. Donadron is at the forefront explaining some instructions as he is set to lead the party inside. Before he can finish talking, goblins start to pour out of the cave and a full-blown battle takes place right outside. The goblins start to prove heavy on the regular adventurers, but they steer away from Fran, realizing her reputation as a goblin slayer. Fran then uses a unique skill called Air Leap to gain height. From the top, she uses Teacher's magic for an explosive attack, taking down a load of goblins by herself. Following a series of high-power magic attacks, she clears a path inside the dungeon and enters alone, leaving the party behind. The party follows her, but their progress is much slower as more and more goblins and hobgoblins get in their way. Fran and Teacher's plan is simple: cover as much ground as they can, and if things get out of hand, use the Feather of Return for a quick escape. Unlike outside, goblins inside the cave take a stand against Fran, and Teacher advises her to take care of the ones that give crystals first. He guides her through the horde, letting her know which one of them had a crystal to give. After taking care of the mob, they spook a couple of goblin archers who flee deeper inside the dungeon. Teacher asks Fran to carefully follow them as they are running toward the king and the queen. Donadron and the party are doing quite good for themselves, but they find it weird that so many goblins were left alive even though Fran was so deep into the cave. Donadron expresses his worry because as strong as she may be, Fran is still a kid. Fran and Teacher make their way to the king and the queen, who are much larger in size compared to even the biggest goblins. A small army of goblins surrounds the king and queen as they start to become wary of Fran's presence. Teacher proposes a plan to thin out the army with some heavy spells, and use the chaos as a distraction for Fran to directly engage the king and queen. Fran holds him high as he begins to launch fire magic, making flames rain all over the goblins. The field gets covered in smoke, and Fran readies herself to fight the king and queen, only to realize they were already dead thanks to the explosions. Fran then asks him if the exploration was over before coming across a large red wooden door. She opens up and enters inside, very optimistic about her chance to meet the dungeon master and potentially kill him as well. As soon as they enter inside, the door closes and a horde of army beetles comes flying towards Fran. The two fight against the bugs for about 30 minutes, but there is still no end to them. Teacher notices that the leader of the horde had been summoning magic and was making sure they had an endless supply of soldiers regardless of how much Fran defeated them. She then kills the horde leader as well, and by the time they are done with the insects, Fran reaches level 17. After finishing that level, they then see a similar door, this time with a blue coloration. Fran instantly feels the intense magical aura coming from inside the level as she takes her time before barging in. Teacher boosts her defenses up with a bunch of support magic. He then tells her he was planning on a killer recipe called curry, leading Fran to jump in excitement to see what it is. Inside the door is a much more ominous part of the cave where a dragon-like creature is waiting for its prey. The party on the other hand has just made its way to the red door and cannot budge it at all. Teacher scouts the dragon-like creature and identifies him to be a greater demon. He is utterly shocked by how high the stats of that monster are. Teacher is a bit on edge after seeing a bunch of magic and skills that he was not familiar with. He then recalls that according to Randall, greater demons are B rank and capable of taking whole kingdoms on their own. In the far corner, an old goblin with a petite figure urges the demon to end the fight fast. Teacher realizes that he must be the dungeon master and that the orb he was guarding is the dungeon core. The demon's weapon is an enchanted steel longsword with an attack stat of over 1000. Seeing this, Teacher has to be sure of every move they make since one mistake can prove fatal. The fight seems lightweight for a while, but all of a sudden the demon disappears and then reappears behind Fran, cutting off both of her hands. Teacher comes in clutch though, guarding her before the demon could land a fatal blow. He instantly heals her as well. The demon is impressed by her abilities and starts to spam his teleportation. It takes a while for Teacher to realize he was just using Fran's shadow to manifest himself around the space. Despite this, Fran keeps up her composure and is determined to win since she wants to know what curry tastes like. Things get even tougher for the two as the demon then uses his skill taker ability and basically copies all of Fran's skills and abilities. Now that he has taken Fran's skill, the demon is confident about taking her down with ease. He rushes Fran with no caution whatsoever, but to his surprise, there is no difference in the way they fight. Fran points out that she still has all of her powers, and Teacher then realizes that the demon couldn't take her powers since she shares them with him. Simply put, Fran borrows all of her abilities from the sword itself, and the demon's skill taker isn't able to take away borrowed power. Seeing the demon in such a pinch, the dungeon master summons a bunch of elite goblin fighters to aid him in battle. The demon feels insulted by this and takes out the goblins himself, warning the dungeon master to stay out of his way or else he'd meet the same fate. He grows tired of playing games with Fran and prepares to end it all with a large-scale attack called Darkness Volticer. The party feels the impact of the attack all the way through the red door. Fran barely manages to dodge the attack as deflecting it was not even a choice. She doesn't go unscathed, in fact the attack dealt a lot of damage and she finds it hard to get back on her feet. Teacher decides that they have done enough and prepares to use the feather to escape. Fran, however, wants to protect Elisa at all costs and continues the fight, asking Teacher for his utmost support. The demon on the other hand is relentless with his dark magic, which Teacher finds hard to counter as he knows very little of it. He tries to think of a weakness as Fran keeps getting ragdolled. Teacher finds it odd that a repulsive demon like that made sure nothing was harming the dungeon master. He then remembers the time Donadron talked about how killing the dungeon master would mess with the stability of the dungeon core. This would ultimately result in the death of all monsters inside. He then tells Fran to aim for the dungeon master, and as soon as she does, the greater demon puts his body in harm's way to protect the dungeon master. They then begin to attack the dungeon master with countless fire spells. The demon puts up a magical shield, in front of which renders most of the attacks useless. Teacher tells Fran that they should aim all their power in one big attack in an attempt to perish the shield. Instead of a magical attack, Fran throws Teacher straight toward the demon. The demon, unknown of the Teacher's self-awareness, predicts the trajectory and tries to block him. Teacher waits for his exact moment and changes his direction mid-air, fooling the demon into wasting his attack. He goes straight towards the demon's crystal and uses all of his force to finally land a fatal blow to the demon's chest. The crystal is broken and the demon perishes, but teacher pays the price as he breaks down into pieces. Fran starts to hold the remnants and cries over his death, only for him to restore his former self by absorbing the mana stored in the demon's crystal. The dungeon master takes this chance to summon more demons, but Fran takes notice of him and stops him from doing so. Teacher stops her from landing the final blow as he sees that the dungeon core is done for and the monsters then perish. The dungeon itself changes form and turns into a much more colorful and safe ecosystem, indicating that it had come to a halt. The party arrives after the whole battle is done. They see that Fran is doing fine and are shocked to see the corpse of a B-rank demon just lying there. Even so, Donadron is furious that she took matters into her own hands despite him telling her that engaging alone would be dangerous. By the time she exits the dungeon, teacher points out that Fran is now level 25, 11 levels higher than when she entered the dungeon. They also review a ton of new skills and mastery that they had unlocked inside the dungeon. More importantly, they are focused on Skill Taker, which in their mind is the most significant achievement. As such, they max out this skill, and in return, they now have a 100% chance of stealing the skill of whomever they want. Clint looks over the report and congratulates Fran for her effort. He then cryptically asks her what happened to the demon's crystal. She honestly replies that it had been destroyed, which Clint finds hard to believe but lets it slide. Still, a random knight appears behind her, claiming to know the truth and that Fran was lying about the crystal. Thanks for watching part 2, future parts will be in a pinned comment below.